Good morning. Can I welcome members, invited guests and the public, both here and watching on the webcast, to today's meeting of the Economy Committee. Today's meeting will focus on the performance of London and Partners. We encourage anyone to take part in the discussion on social media using the hashtag Assembly Economy and London LP. We've just got a few short items of formal business to go through first. Please can everybody make sure that their electric devices are turned off or switched to silent to avoid any unnecessary interruptions. Have there been any apologies, Claire?
Thank you. We've received no apologies for absence.
Thank you. Can I ask members to note the list of appointments set out in item 2 and ask if members have any other interest to declare? No, thank you. Can we agree the minutes from our meeting of the 4th of October 2018?
Yes.
Thank you. Can we note the completed and outstanding actions arising from previous meetings?
Noted.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the action taken by me to agree the output from the committee's discussion on LEAP and the committee's response to the Mayor's draft strategy for sport in London? Can I also ask the committee to note the letters attached as appendices 1 and 2 to the report? Thank you. So that brings us to today's main discussion item on the performance of London and Partners. So can I welcome Laura Citron, Chief Executive of London and Partners, and Andrew Cooke, Managing Director of Operations and Governance at London and Partners. I'm going to kick off the questions. The first section is on transparency. You're aware, both of you, I think, of the long-standing concerns over transparency, not publishing full board papers and minutes, staffing structures and salaries. So can you tell me, if I start with Laura, please, what is stopping L&P from being more transparent?
We are very committed to being an open organisation that delivers great value for money for London taxpayers. We were set up as a public-private partnership under the previous administration. When this administration came in, it reviewed our governance and confirmed that it was fit for purpose. And we have recently just been audited by MOPAC, which carries out the audit function for the GLA, which also found that the way that we were spending our grant money was satisfactory. We publish the summary of all of our board minutes, and we have also recently started to publish a gift and hospitality register and also the register of all spending over £150,000.
Have you anything to add, Andrew?
As Laura's said, we are committed to being open in terms of how we spend taxpayers' money. We believe we do that in terms of publishing the summaries of the board minutes, appearing in front of the Assembly, inviting you to our AGM. In fact, there's an invitation coming out to you this week for our AGM on the 22nd of November, so we hope that we will see some of you there. But as Laura said, we were set up by the previous mayor as a public-private partnership to allow us to operate in a more commercial and entrepreneurial environment.
Okay, I mean, you will understand our concerns. Millions of pounds of taxpayers' money goes to London and Partners. You claim you've added £340 million to London's economy and supported over 10,000 jobs in the year 16 to 17. But when we've asked you to provide evidence of this, you've refused. Why would you refuse to do that?
We have recently published a new valuation methodology, and we have historically always published the details of how we have met our numbers for both jobs and gross value added to the London economy. We're very happy to share how we add value to the London economy. If I can take a specific example on inward investment, which is obviously a large part of the added benefit to the London economy. Every time we work with a business that we convince to bring into London and help them to establish themselves in London, we survey that business and we ask them how many jobs they plan to create over the next 3 years. And importantly, we ask them what difference we as London and Partners have made in their decision to choose London, in how quickly they were able to set up, and in how many jobs they were able to create. We then take those numbers and we discount them, and that's to ensure that our measurement is as robust and conservative as possible. And we discount them for a number of factors. First of all, we apply an over-optimism bias. That's because we know that when entrepreneurs give a prediction of what the jobs they might create over the next 3 years, sometimes that's not actually achieved. And we know from the historical records how much they tend to overestimate by, and so we discount for that. Secondly, we discount for time preference, which is that we know that jobs this year are worth more than jobs in 3 years' time, and the importance of bringing jobs into the economy quickly, so we add a further discount for that effect. We also discount for displacement, which is whether it's displacing jobs that were already in the London economy. Importantly, we discount for additionality, which is what difference did we as London and partners make in landing that investment, not according to us, but according to the business themselves of what they have declared in the survey. We don't claim any jobs or growth numbers beyond 3 years, so many of the investments that we bring into London will persist for many more than 3 years, and we certainly hope they do, but we only claim the first 3 years' worth of jobs. So that taken together, we believe is a very robust methodology for showing the impact of what we have done on the London economy, and it's also a conservative estimate.
Okay, I mean, you've sent us, I'll just ask this and I'll come to you. You've sent us your methodology, but actually we don't have access to any of the information that goes in at the beginning of the methodology. So whilst you've got a methodology in place, it's important for us to know what business is going at the beginning to see what's churned out at the end. And you've refused to give us any information on businesses that go in at the beginning part of it.
I think we're happy to provide a breakdown, and I believe we have in terms of which markets they're coming from and which sectors they're in. We wouldn't, I don't think, be able to provide the actual names of the business because that's quite commercially sensitive information for those individual investors.
You say that, but I mean, when businesses make investments, when they hire people, it's all out there in the public domain anyway. If they're getting free advice from you, surely you could say, but one of the costs of the advice is that, you know, we let everybody know who's coming to us, etc.
So we do ask businesses to sign an engagement letter with us when we start working with them. We ask them at the end of the process whether they are happy for us to publish their investment, and some of those investors say that they're not. So we respect that.
Why would they say that they're not?
Because they may not have actually made the announcement to set up at the stage when we have completed our work with them.
So what percentages of all the businesses that you help?
I don't have that information with me. I'm happy to provide that to you.
Well, I'll take that as an action, please. But is it not possible for you to say that this is one of the terms and conditions of us assisting you? Especially, I mean, some of the figures you've come out with are so enormous that, so if you went to a business and said, look, you know, we're responsible for millions of pounds coming into the economy, we're so good, we are responsible for thousands and thousands of jobs remaining in London, that's how good we are. But, you know, the basis upon which we'll help you is that, right, and you say this right from the beginning, is that you let us disclose who we're helping.
Very happy to provide examples of the kinds of businesses that we have worked with, of those who are happy for it to be disclosed. And we can certainly provide examples from different sectors of the economy and from different markets that they've come in from. We can take it away to look at whether we may be able to ask for a higher level of disclosure for those businesses that we do work with. My concern would be that we would be limiting our impact because we would reduce the number of investors that we were able to work with.
Save for the fact, of course, that they are getting this for nothing, whereas other capital cities, with people doing the same as you are doing, very often charge a fee, even if it's a fee only if you are successful. We don't do that, and I say we because I'm a taxpayer, so my money, as well as everybody around here, is going into London and Partners. And I think, given the millions that go into London and Partners, we're entitled to see how you come to these great big figures, which, you know, we should all admire. They're amazing, but we really would like to know how you get to that. Sean, did you want to come in?
Just 2 points. One, we would all admire the figures if we could have them corroborated. That would be important for us. You do understand our, I think scepticism is a strong term, but without some kind of evidence base, it is hard for us to support London Partners. It is our job to look at these things, and it does feel like you're not as open as you could be. You say that you ask businesses to sign an engagement letter, and when you come to the end of the process, some say no, they don't want to speak about what's been going on for them. But what about the ones who do say yes? Why don't we publish that information?
You can look again at what kind of information we publish and how we evidence the benefit that we've added to the economy. We do provide lots of examples of the businesses that we've worked with, and I'm happy for us to provide more.
But you do see how an example is not particularly useful to us when we're trying to look at the cost effectiveness of this investment that all Londoners are making here. And of course, if these figures that you say are correct or even close, seems like it's money well spent, but of course we can't make that decision. And I feel like just the publishing of the businesses that say yes would help your case, because you'd be able to say, look at the broad set of people we work with, look at what's going on. My other last question is, what attempt do you make to get the real jobs that actually exist? So as a business, I come to you, I tell you 1,000 jobs, you say great, you do whatever adjustments you do. Do you make any attempt to come back and see what I actually did?
We do, yes. We continue to survey the businesses for several years after they've worked with us, and that's the basis of our discounting data in terms of, for example, how we calculate our over-optimism bias is because we have historical data as to what's actually happened compared to what they said was going to happen. Yes, we do.
Where and how is that information made public?
I can write to you with more detail on that, I'm happy to.
Where and how is it made public?
So the methodology is public.
No, the numbers, not the methodology, the numbers. So you've just said you go back and you resurvey these businesses and they give you, what I think you could rightly suggest are more accurate figures because they're actual. Where is that information given publicly?
That number becomes the over-optimism bias number that we apply in our methodology, and that number is published in our methodology.
Against every business, against
It's taken
sectors,
as an average.
Overall average or sector average?
I'd need to check in the methodology, but we can get back to you with the detail.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, Andrew's going to ask questions on the budget.
Yeah, before I do that, a couple of questions just following up what you've just been talking about. You said there's an engagement letter. Can we see a model copy of
Yes.
an engagement letter? And secondly, you say some say they don't want to have it published, others therefore would be happy to. What percentage say they wouldn't like it published, and those that say they wouldn't?
I don't have that information. We'll check and come back to you on that.
Okay, I mean, presumably though, if you've got people who are prepared to have it published, that's a good advert for you in terms of attracting other business. So I don't understand what the secrecy is all about. If people are happy to be named to say they've had your assistance, why you don't use that as a marketing tool to attract more?
And indeed we do. That's why we have a lot of case studies on our website.
But naming the companies?
Yes.
Yeah.
But not every company.
Sorry?
Not every company.
That says yes?
No, we haven't done that.
Yeah, well, that's what I don't understand, why it's such a big secret if they're happy to be published. Why?
As Laura said, we'll take it away and look at it.
No, can I, just before Andrew goes on with budget, can you understand why we are concerned about the transparency here?
Yes, we understand your concerns. As I said, we think we are being transparent and open particularly in terms of how we spend taxpayers' money.
But Andrew, I spoke to you a year ago. It was one of my very first meetings ever. And we were expressing deep concerns then, because millions of pounds of taxpayers' money goes into this. Great big long bits of methodology come out without any information of what goes into it in order for anything to come out of. Commercial sensitivity is mentioned constantly, and it would appear to some, I'm sure, that that's something that you can hide behind. We're not talking about small amounts of money. We are talking about millions and millions. And the figures that you give are so large. If you are that good at what you're doing, which I'm sure we must accept you are, I would have thought that you'd have been proud to explain exactly how you come to that figure.
We are proud of our methodology, which, as you know, we've recently refreshed to make it even more robust, and it's become more robust and more conservative. GLA Economics have reviewed it in great detail and are satisfied with it, as has the Department for International Trade, and we are collectively of the view that it is a very high standard of evaluation for an economic development agency of our type.
But that's what worries me. You're proud of the methodology. I'm sure if I'd have been you sitting there with these figures, I'd have been saying, I'm very proud of what we achieve. The methodology is just confusing to all, and without any of the information what goes into it, it's pretty useless to those of us trying to scrutinise what's going on. Andrew's going to ask some questions about the budget.
I mean, from our point of view, it's a bit like you marking your own homework. That's
Absolutely.
how it looks. Just to follow up the point the Chair's been making, half of your £27 million income comes from public funds, and that's why it's our responsibility to scrutinise that expenditure of public funds, and all we seem to get is this blank, very vague, not detailed, very vague assertions. That's why we're concerned. But can I go on and look at your budget, starting from where the money comes from, and say half your 27 million comes from the GLA, one side or another, but the other half comes from non-GLA sources. So what are your main funding streams there?
Okay, so there are 5 key sources of non-GLA income, and actually we use our GLA grant to secure some of that income as well, which allows us to broaden the range of our activities. What proportion of the GLA funds goes on that? No proportion of actual funds, but we will use it to match fund activity. So we can spend money on marketing activity, for instance, which will then encourage partners to support that activity. So in terms of the 5 income streams, there are other public sector grants of £2 million. So those are EU funds from the European Regional Development Fund to support our trade and growth programmes. There's also national grants in terms of the Discover England Fund to help us encourage tourists to visit London and other parts of the country. We have fees from our partners, so we run 2 main partnership schemes. We have 300 partners who support our tourism activity and around 50 partners who support our trade and growth activity, and that generates around £1.6 million for us. A further £1 million.
Sorry, you say 1.6 million?
Yes.
But according to the figures we've got here for your budget plan 18-19, that's 951,000.
The £951,000 is for partners that fund particular activities. So that is ring-fenced funding for particular activities. So that would be a number of companies who accompany us on trade shows, and they fund their activity in terms of going on those trade shows.
So where's the rest of the money that you just mentioned accounted for?
The 1.6 million is, I think you've got a figure of 5.37 million, have you there, in terms of commercial activities?
Commercial earnings, 5.3.
5.3, yes. So the 1.6 is part of that 5.3. The rest of that 5.3 is from our commercial subsidiaries. So that is us selling website domains, .london domains.
Okay, well, we'll come on to that. So your 5.3 commercial earnings also includes, therefore, contributions from your partners?
Yes.
Right, okay. So what I don't understand is why that's shown separately from the contribution from partners lines. Why is that commercial income as opposed to your partners just coughing up to help?
I think it's just how we have aggregated it in the budget. I'm giving you the fuller breakdown.
Okay. And are the identities of your partners and other agencies public?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, go on.
So, as I mentioned, the 3.7 million from our commercial subsidiaries. So that's .london domains, selling the website domain .london, and then our other subsidiary, London Partners Ventures, which is mainly advertising revenue from our websites, particularly Visit London, and other income, so income, for instance, from renting out our boardroom and TV studio in our office. Then the final significant amount of income is what we call in-kind income. So this is an actual cash. This is benefit in kind that we receive from partners. That accounts for up to £5.2 million of benefit. So that could be anything such as airline tickets or hotel rooms for competitions, or free advertising for our campaigns to extend our reach. It's particularly important to us. It doesn't show in our annual accounts, but is in our management accounts and budget.
Okay, and how much of that is from public sources?
None of it.
None of it. So it's not, for example, using, I don't know, embassy or high commission facilities in any of these other countries that you're bidding for,
No.
little parties and things, none of that. Okay. And that doesn't include any help from DTI or whatever it's called now?
No.
Okay. Can I come to the EU funding next? I think you've got 2 EU programmes, Go to Grow and the London Growth Network. Is that right? Okay. And the total figure there, presumably that's from the figures we've got here is 2.4 million to Go to Grow and 3.1 million London Growth Network. Presumably that's for more than 1 year.
Yes, it is.
That's the total.
That's the total. Yes.
Okay. How long do you think those programmes were going to last for?
So the current funding for the Go to Grow programme ends in December this year. We have submitted a bid for a further 3 years of ERDF funding commencing in January 2019. We're just waiting for final sign-off on that. In addition to that funding for that programme, we're also generating additional partner income to support that. So we have partners lined up for that next stage of that programme. In terms of the business growth programme, that runs until September 2019. We're currently waiting for a bid for an extension until March 2020. And we are also then looking to prepare a bid for a further extension until May 2023.
And how is Brexit? Well, we'll come on to Brexit later on, but is Brexit going to prevent you applying for those funds, or are you still going to be able to go for them?
No, the government has guaranteed funding for any structural funds until the UK leaves the EU.
Okay, so that's up until 2021.
It seems that the programmes are going to run until 2023.
Okay. I think I just want to go back to your budget. So other grants you've told us is from other ones from the public sector, like Discover England and so forth. And you've told us about the EU. Are there any other public sector grants or income?
No.
Okay. And the Discover England funding, what was that used for?
So that's used, it's a fund from national government. It's predominantly aimed to support tourism into other parts of the country. We are partnering with a number of those bids in terms of using London as a springboard to encourage tourists first to come into London and then visit other parts of the country. So we've been working with Manchester and Birmingham in that regard. It's been a very successful programme. Okay.
So the money from Discover England, that's our share of it, or is that the total? Presumably some goes to these other places.
That's our share of it. Okay.
And you talked about the .London domain. How much have you earned from that?
So last year we took a dividend from the company of 1.8 million.
Okay. And then we've talked about what value and kind contributions are, so I won't go back onto that one. But the Chair quite rightly raised in her questions to you, considering whether you have considered charging a fee for what you do, or like other promotion agencies, or is it always going to be free?
So we have looked at charging as a possibility. I think most other foreign direct investment agencies don't charge companies that are looking to set up in their country. We have looked at what Business France are doing, so they actually do charge for a consultancy in terms of providing support for other agencies in terms of how they attract investment. We have looked at that model ourselves in terms of, we get a lot of cities coming to us in terms of looking for know-how in terms of how we have set up London and Partners. We have looked at that as a model. We don't think currently it's the model that's right for us, particularly in the current environment when we're looking to respond to Brexit. We think that would be a distraction. It might be something that we look at in the future. Okay,
so back to the wall, is it?
Well, we've got an important job to do at the moment.
Yeah, okay. The chance to come in, but before I do that, but one last question on where the money comes from. I just wondered how your income compares with other parts of the world. For example, Paris, Berlin, are we on a par with those or spending far less?
So the last time we looked at this, Paris and Berlin had double the budget that we had.
Sorry.
Okay, if I can just, if you don't mind, Andrew, just come in on the Dot London. Can you explain how Dot London works?
Yes. New domain names were released a number of years ago in terms of top-level domain names for geographies. So cities could apply for their domain name. So the GLA was able to apply for .London, and they allowed us to take that forward in terms of setting up the business. And we work with a registry provider called MMX, who runs the business on our behalf. Okay,
so you were given that really to then sell on?
Yeah.
By the GLA?
By the GLA.
Okay. Do you know if that led to came through a competitive tender in the first place, or it was just purchased and then given to you?
It wasn't an actual purchase. We paid the fee in terms of registering with ICANN, which is the international body which controls domain names.
Thank you.
If the GLA gave you the .com domain, does that show as a value in kind contribution?
No.
But presumably it must be, if it's worth 1.8 million in terms of income, surely it was a value in kind contribution, wasn't it?
Well, they didn't give us they gave us the right to set up the business.
Yeah, but that in itself must be a value in kind.
They gave you the IP.
If you're earning 1.8 million a year from it, and they gave it to you for nothing, then presumably that's value in kind that should be shown in the budget at some point, whether originally when it first happened or as an annual figure.
We don't claim value in kind for any of the support in kind that we get from the GLA or the GLA family, which is extensive. So, for example, if the mayor travels on a trade delegation and does media, that has huge value in terms of promoting London to its international audiences. But we would never claim value in kind on anything that's from the GLA or indeed the wider public sector. We think of value in kind in terms of how we can leverage more support from the private sector for our activities.
But that's tacitly not the same. You are talking about the mayor talking about London, which is one thing, and this generates an income. It shows up somewhere in your accounts. Surely it is value in kind. You were gifted something that generates a return annually. It's not the same as comparing it to the activities of the mayor. Surely it should show up in the way my colleague is suggesting.
Our auditors have never indicated that. We can certainly raise that with them again. Very happy to do that.
I think if we're looking at going back to transparency, if you've had something given to you that's worth 1.8 million a year for nothing, I would have thought it would appear somewhere. Anyway, can I go on and look at where we've looked at where the money comes from? Can we look at where the money goes to? So first of all, how did you decide what your priorities should be?
So we start with our strategy. So we developed a new 3-year strategy which sets out the priorities for the organisation. And a key theme of that strategy is greater focus, so we can have more impact in terms of our activities. So we've looked at how we can shift our spend in 3 key areas. So that is by spending more resources in core markets. So we have identified 5 key core markets that we want to focus on, which we think will give us the greatest returns. That's France, Germany, North America, China and India. And our aim there is to increase the spend from last year, it was just under half, to this year it's around 60%, and our aim is to get to 80% by 2020, at the end of the third year.
80% of your expenditure?
80% of our expenditure on those core markets. That includes increasing the spend of our staff that are based in market, so increasing the number of staff in market. So we have effectively doubled our presence in market over the last year. So that's shifting our staff resource from 8% to 15% in market, which we will have done by next year. It's also then about how we focus more on influencing people earlier in their decision making. So before they've made a decision to come to London. And that means that we're reducing some of our work once businesses or tourists have made the decision to come here. So we'll be focusing particularly on contestable investments and then in attracting visitors sort of pre-decision, because it's actually the market can do the conversion in terms of when people actually book their trip. So by 2020 we aim to have around, again, 80% of our funds focused on activity to influence decisions, which is up from 65% last year. And then finally, we're aiming to spend more of our marketing budget on London's brand. So historically, our marketing spend has been focused on specific audiences. To reach those audiences earlier in the decision-making cycle, we really need to focus our effort on building London's global brand based on the messages that resonate with those audiences.
Okay. What input does the Mayor have in the decision-making processes on priorities?
So the GLA agree our strategy, they agree our annual business plan. We're just preparing a draft business plan for next year now, so that can be scrutinised as part of the overall Mayor's budget by the Assembly. So this is something that we've agreed to do now in terms of shifting the timing of when we develop our business plan, so the Assembly can have some say in that as well, in terms of scrutinising that as part of the Mayor's budget.
Okay, I see from the figures we've got here that your operations line went up from 3.9 million to 6.1 million, effectively 50%, between 13-14 and the current year. And I think I saw in your letter earlier that that's because of opening the overseas offices. Is that right?
It's partly the overseas offices. This year it has gone up a little bit more because we have restructured the business, so there have been some additional costs and transition costs in terms of doing that. But actually the proportion of our operations costs to the overall costs of the business have been relatively stable at around 52 or 53% for the last few years.
So the
cost of the overall business, the income we've generated has gone up, the costs have gone up, and the operations costs have remained at a similar proportion.
I mean, it does seem quite an extraordinary jump over a short period. When the other budgets we've got here, marketing, conventions, major events, trade, higher education, research, have been the sort of increase you'd expect of, you know, a few percentage points. So why has your core cost gone up so much?
Well, I think every business has been facing increased costs in terms of core costs. So we've had a rent increase, rates increase, service charge increases, increases in our staff salaries in terms of cost of living increases there. We've also been investing heavily in technology as well. We have transformed our web services so we can offer more personalised content through our web. We're currently looking to invest in a new CRM system to allow us to better able to convert.
You say you're looking to invest, so have you invested or you're going to?
We're going to. I'm just giving you an example of some of the technology investments that we're
But if
making.
we're talking about an actual figure, you can't tell us about something that you haven't done yet.
No, okay. I apologise for that. There's also the cost of, we refurbished our office a number of years ago to increase the amount of headcount we could get into the office, to allow for the growth that you've seen over the last few years in terms of the additional business programmes we're bringing in.
That was done a few years ago. That won't feature in 17-18, will it?
The depreciation costs will still be there.
If I might add, we're very conscious and careful of our platform costs and making sure that we keep them to a minimum so that we can spend as much of our budget as possible on promoting London. One of the things that we've done this year, as Andrew mentioned, is to restructure the organisation in order to reduce the amount that we were spending on staff costs so that we could reinvest that money into programming. And we have reduced our total headcount by 20 this year, which is about 10% of our total headcount. In this current year, that increases our platform cost because of the restructuring cost, but we've done it in order to make a saving over the next few years so that we can keep our platform cost stable.
How much of that 6.1 million relates to opening the new overseas offices?
So the cost of opening the new offices is around 1.3 million this year, so in terms of salary costs and the office costs.
And I expect you'll get some questions on how you evaluate their performance as well. But I think this all comes back to the transparency issue. You know, we're getting possibly quite reasonable explanations for this, but we've got no way of checking the numbers that go with it because of the lack of transparency. Can you tell us how you're using the extra money the Mayor has given you for Brexit defence?
So our response to Brexit really takes four main parts. Though having said that, the whole of our new 3-year strategy was created since the referendum, so it responds to that changed context. But our specific response has 4 parts. The first is increasing our efforts in market to find and convince new investors. The second is around addressing misperceptions about the availability of talent in London now and into the future, because we recognise that that is a key area of concern for investors. The third is on retaining jobs and businesses that are already invested in London by engaging with them very actively here. And the fourth area is having a confident and credible and positive narrative about London's future.
Okay, you say you've got a 3-year strategy. Is this, if we take, is that start, when does that start
It
from?
started in April this year, so we're in year 1 now.
Right, because it's 2.5 years since the referendum. Okay. You've been asked this quite a few times about why we can't see a breakdown of your spending over £250. Is it that you can't give us that figure, or because you won't give us that figure?
It's difficult for us to give you that figure. It's so we don't break down our expenditure like that. It would take us some significant resource to provide that, we think that, you know, we have taken steps to increase the transparency in terms of the spend. So we now publish our contracts of over £150,000.
There's only half a dozen of them, though, isn't there?
There aren't many in terms of that.
So can we look at that threshold and see if we can have a rather more meaningful one?
We can take that back to our board. We were recently audited by MOPAC as the GLA's internal audit function, who were satisfied with what they found. And in addition, under the terms of our grant agreement, the GLA is able to audit us at any time.
Okay, well, I'll still come back to my point about marking your own homework. Chair.
Okay, just a couple of questions, if I may go back on a couple of points. Why exactly do partners and agencies give you money, and what exactly do they get for it?
So if we if we look at partners first, so private sector partners, and then public sector agencies, as those are quite different. We have 3 main types of private sector partners. We have tourism industry partners, We have partners who fund our inward investment work, and we have partners who fund our work supporting small businesses in London. They work with us in fairly different ways. Our tourism partners work with us because they want to support the overall promotion of London as a destination, because anyone who's running a hotel or a restaurant or an attraction in London benefits from that, and also to get their own attraction or venue or hotel promoted through our channels. They also work with us and pay a partnership fee, in some ways like a trade association, because they benefit from a lot of industry insights and networking that we provide. So we provide, for example, a lot of up-to-date data on the tourism industry, which those partners have access to. So that's the tourism partners, which is the largest group of partners in terms of the number of partners that there are. The second group of partners is those that we work with on inward investment. Those are businesses that provide the kinds of services that an investor would need when they want to set up an office in London. So that would be everything from lawyers, tax, immigration, relocation, PR, workspace, recruitment. So all the kinds of services that an investor would need when they come into a market for the first time. We choose those partners very carefully based on the level of service they provide, so making sure that it's good quality, but also that they're specialised in helping the kinds of businesses of the size and source market that we work with. So, for example, if they're going to work with us on supporting Chinese investors into the market, they need to have Chinese speakers who can give a good level of service. So they pay a partnership fee in order that they would be our priority referrals when we're working with a business that comes into London.
And what sort of fee would that be?
We can provide a breakdown, but it's in the range of about £3,000 to £5,000 a year, I believe. But they're different depending on exactly which businesses they are and how large they are.
And how many people are paying into this?
It's about 50 companies.
About 50?
Roughly,
I have been told, but I don't know what you think about this, that an incentive for a business to give you money is that they gain access to the mayor. What's your thoughts on that? Is that right?
The businesses that we work with as partners don't get priority access to the mayor, in my experience.
No.
Okay, fair enough. Do you ever envisage a time when London and Partners will be completely self-sufficient and won't require taxpayers' money? You're both looking shocked.
Not in our current business plan, but we're always looking at ways to generate more revenue. And, for example, we recognise that our ERDF funding, as we've discussed, is probably time limited. It looks like the time horizon is 2023 on that. So we're actively looking now at how we can boost commercial income so that those programmes, for example, could be sustainable. But every competitor city in the world that London would consider a serious rival has a significant taxpayer-funded promotional agency. Those promotional agencies are, by and large, funded to a much larger degree than London and Partners. They have much larger budgets and they raise significantly less private sector funding as a proportion of their income than we do.
That doesn't make it right.
No,
Just because other people do it, it doesn't make it right. It's like we hear your methodology is great because it's used by other companies that do similar work to you do. That doesn't make it right, because if they don't publish who the businesses are going at the beginning, then anybody scrutinising that would be in as much fog as we are, because if you're all saying the same thing but not giving the correct information out, it doesn't make it right. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Sean, I think you want to go on to your section.
I just want to move on to looking at how London Partners approach to measuring impact. I mean, my first opening question would be, what's your assessment of FDI inflows into London at the moment? What's your assessment on how well are they doing? What impact are you having on that process, that outcome of?
So at the moment, we are on track against our FDI target for the year, if we look at what we've done year to date. However, what we are seeing is that we're having to work harder to generate inward investment leads, and we're having to work harder to convince businesses to come to London.
So how is London doing in comparison to other EU cities, Paris, Frankfurt, Berlin?
So if we look at the historic data, so for last year, which is what we have, London continued to be the top destination in Europe for venture capital investment, for example. But we do know that inward investment to London, I believe in the first 6 months of last year, was down on the first 6 months of 2016. We obviously don't know the 2018 data yet because it's not out.
But that's a comparison with London. My question is, what's London doing against other European destinations, even other world destinations at this point?
I can get back to you with the more detailed data. Anecdotally, London continues to be a strong destination for inward investment, but the indicators lag, so the data lags.
Yeah, I get that. That's fair. But you do see that, from our point of view, if we have a body that looks at London's competitive nature against everybody else, those figures should be readily available to you and to us. You should make them available. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's what you're meant to be doing. So it shouldn't be something that you have to get back to me about. Let me change focus slightly and talk about how many companies interested in investing in London did you approach in 16, 17, 18, those 2 years? You know, how many companies do you directly go out and, you know, court to come to London?
I couldn't tell you the exact number now, but I'm happy to get back to you with that.
Can you give me a ballpark?
So at any one time, I think we have somewhere around 1,000 companies in our pipeline. We convert, on average, around 200 companies a year, slightly more last year.
Okay, but again, I not to flog a dead horse, but this is your activity. These should be the things you have available to us. That's why people are using terms like fog and challenging the spend here. And I have a slightly different question. You say that other cities, I think you use Paris, say they have a significantly bigger budget, but how much of that budget do they generate commercially?
So in Paris, they have different agencies for inward investment as for tourism. So they don't have a single entity like London and Partners.
Okay.
We can send you the exact breakdown, but my understanding is that they generate less commercial income than we do as a proportion of their total budget. Okay,
I accept that you wouldn't be sort of really deep on their figures. I get that. You say you've opened offices all over the world. What sort of cost has that been? What sort of cost has the GLA provided? Income grant has the GLA provided to help that happen? What has the cost been there?
So we have had an additional grant from the GLA for last year and this year, so an additional £350,000 last year and 1.3 million this year to support the opening of those overseas offices and other Brexit-related activity.
So how are you assessing the effectiveness of those offices? Again, if I ask that very simple question in my mind, how many businesses have they approached in wherever they're based? How would you answer that question? Could you give me a number? Are they judged on that on a KPI?
So each of the offices has FDI lead generation targets, so how many businesses not only are they approaching, but who they've actually got to the stage of saying that they are considering investing in London. They have targets not only for their market, but also for the different sectors of the economy. We then have an overall GVA target, which we can break down also by market. We wouldn't put that only onto the overseas office because convincing a business to invest in London is done jointly by the overseas team and the London specialist team.
So how are we then meant to judge the effectiveness of what sounds like quite a huge investment on our part?
So in return for when we were given the additional grant to open the overseas offices, it came alongside an increase in our GVA target. So we have an additional £20 million of GVA to deliver as a result of having those extra offices.
And you have no focus on what any individual office is doing. It's just going to all come up to the centre and that's how you achieve the target?
No, each of the offices has targets not only for overall leads, but for leads per sector. So every office has lead targets.
Okay. Does the FDI additional percentage vary according to company size and sector when you're making these judgments? Is a big company seen as a bigger hit? Is a small company seen as a smaller hit? How do you judge in those particular places? What I'm trying to get at here is the accuracy of your KPIs, if you have any at all, and how you get those out into the public arena and how we can scrutinise those. Because if they don't exist, of course, we have no idea what you're doing.
Yes, so we count the discounted jobs as we discussed the discounting before. So whether it's a big company or a small company, what matters is how many jobs they create in London. So they could be a huge company, but if they only create 5 jobs in London, that's what we count. And then the value of the job, so how they're converted into gross value added, depends on the sector, and that's taken from national statistics data on the value of jobs in very specific subsectors. So yes, that's quite targeted and nuanced.
But there's also another key measure, which is additionality. So we are trying to focus on companies that haven't made the decision to come into London, where we can really influence that decision. So as part of our evaluation, we survey the companies to ask them what difference we made. And that's how we calculate the additionality factor to ensure that our GVMA measure is really additional economic benefit that we can say is attributable to our activities.
Okay, just an additional comment. We've got here your foreign direct investment examples of how you look at FDA contestable clients. I'm looking at it here. It makes very little sense. I think it needs more detail. We need to understand exactly how you find a company and convert that into something, because I can express to you the term FOG has been used. We are paying for this, and of course all of this could be avoided if there was a GLA member on your board. I don't see why that hasn't happened or why it can't happen, and I think you need to look again and maybe explain to us where you are on that decision. That's enough from me, Chair.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Okay, Caroline, to your questions.
Thank you. I'm going to be looking at measuring performance and value for money. We've seen that you have been exceeding your targets for the most part against the key performance indicators, and I understand that you are committed to more stretching key performance indicators and targets for the year ahead. So can you set out for us your KPIs for 2018-19?
Yes, happy to. So our 2018-19 targets are £190 million of gross value added, and that is specifically 80% of which needs to be from our key sectors.
Key sectors?
The priority sectors for London, so that's from financial services and professional services and technology, life sciences, the creative industries, and smart cities, urban technology. So those are our priority sectors, which are drawn from the economic development strategy and agreed with the economic development team at the GLA. Yep. So 190 million from our business-to-business audiences, and 1,000 jobs retained in London as a result of our engagement with businesses who are already invested in London. We're also measuring the impact of our student and tourism work, and we'll be able to share that at the year end.
Okay, so your additional GVA target for 2017-18 was 311 million. So but you're saying it's 190 million.
The last year's GVA included GVA for leisure tourism and also for students. So this is just the business-to-business audiences. So the 190 is comparable to the of last year, the business tourism, the major events, the trade and investment, and the inward investment work. Because we've got a new methodology this year for students and for tourists, we haven't included a GVA target number for that. This year is the baseline year in which we're going to use the new methodology to find the baseline, so that we'll then be able to set a stretching target for next year for our student and our leisure work.
Okay, and then you said 1,000 jobs retained. Is that the same as the 1,000 jobs safeguarded in the 2017-18.
Yes.
Yes, and that was a target that you didn't meet. What do you think led to that target not being met?
It was the first year in which we had given ourselves a target or had a target for retention of jobs. It's taken us some time to work out what's the best way of doing that and to get the activity really up and running and off the ground. It is hard to safeguard 1,000 jobs and importantly to be able to demonstrate that we've done that through survey evidence, but we now have a dedicated team who are working on retention only, and what we have found through the course of the work we did last year was that the single most important retention issue is actually talent. And that's why this year we're really focused on providing this up-to-date and credible information about talent to reassure investors, because we feel that given what we learned from last year and the lessons from last year, that's the best way that we can safeguard jobs. So I'm more optimistic that this year we will meet that 1,000 jobs target. But it is stretching for us. It's a whole new way of working and a new type of activity.
Obviously you've told the Budget and Performance Committee that you're going to be looking to stretch your targets. So you've said that the job safeguarded is a stretch. What else in these targets is stretching for you?
So the 190 million of business-to-business GVA is a real stretch this year for two reasons. One, because the context is more challenging. The closer we get to March, the more challenging it is to convert investment. And also because we've refreshed the evaluation methodology, it's more robust and it's more conservative. So achieving the GVA numbers is more difficult than it was in the past. Additionally, because we're now much more focused on contestability than we were before, we're spending a lot more of our time convincing businesses to come and less of our time supporting them once they've made that decision. And therefore, a lot more of our pipeline is this contestable projects, which are much harder work, but are much better value for London, because that's business that we wouldn't have won if we hadn't intervened. So we feel it's better value for London that we put our efforts into convincing businesses to come, rather than just helping the ones that have already decided to come.
And how are you actually measuring that? How do we know that it's your efforts that have got those businesses to come here?
So we survey all of the businesses that we work with, and we ask them the question, what difference did it make to you? Did working with us convince you to come to London? Did it make you come any faster? And did it make you put more jobs or grow faster once you got here? That we're also essentially changing the sample, if you like, because our teams internationally are now focused on finding those contestable leads. What's going into the pipeline is a lot more contestable than it was in the past. So we have set up a dedicated, what we call a delivery unit, to fast track non-contestable investors. So when our teams in market come across a business who say, oh, we're going to set up an office in London, we refer them straight through immediately to our London team, who will give them fast support to get themselves set up and refer them immediately to private sector partners, because we feel that's where the market is best placed to intervene. What that does is it frees up the time of our teams in market to really focus on finding those businesses earlier when they're undecided, when they're thinking about an international expansion, so that we can be having that conversation with them and saying, when are you thinking about expanding internationally? Are you thinking about London? If not, why not? And then be making the case. And that's a real change of focus.
Thank you.
Caroline, Jeanette wanted to come in. Was it on that specific point?
I can wait till Caroline's finished.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So just going back to the leisure and tourism, have you developed new metrics for measuring your impact on leisure and tourism? And if you haven't, are you in the process of doing that?
So we have. These new metrics for leisure tourism respond to changes in consumer behaviour and also changes in technology, so that it becomes possible to evaluate in a much more robust way than we could in the past. So historically, our method for evaluating our impact on leisure tourism was to survey visitors to our website and ask them what difference our information has made to their choice to come to London. When we introduced that, and during the period that we had it, that was the industry standard way that most destination marketing organisations in the world would measure tourism activity, including, for example, Visit Britain and our colleagues in Paris and so on. We now have a new methodology that is really industry leading, and it responds to the change in consumer behaviour and to the change in data. So in terms of consumer behaviour, people now get their information from a much wider array of sources than just a website, and it wouldn't be necessarily that someone would go onto the Visit London website and that would be alone what would convince them to come to London. We would want them to be finding our content in social media, in news articles, in a whole range of different places, watching videos on YouTube. And what our new methodology does is it allows us to capture the impact of what we've done across all those channels, not just the website. The second big difference is that in the past we've had to rely on survey data. So we ask people to report to us what the impact of our activity has been. And obviously that's reliable to some extent, but it's quite fraught because you're depending on a human being to declare to you what's happened, and also you're dependent to some extent on the sample of people who are prepared to fill in the survey. What we're now able to do for the first time with technology is to compare panels of people who have seen our messages and who haven't, and observe their actual behaviour. So when we look at people who have watched our videos or seen our posts on social media, and we compare them to people who haven't, we can then see what they do. So did they then go on to book a trip to London? So it's a much more robust way of being able to evaluate whether what we've done and our marketing has made a difference to someone's choice to come to London.
Okay, and are you also looking at the sorts of businesses that these visitors to London are interacting with? Because we have a whole range of businesses here, from sort of, the very big mass market hotels to the sort of tiny sort of hotels, like around Earl's Court, who used to serve the exhibition centre when it was there. Are you kind of looking at how the sort of more micro businesses are benefiting or otherwise from the marketing that you're doing?
Absolutely, and for us that's been a key driver of our whole new tourism strategy, which is to make sure that tourism in London is generating good growth for London, which is partly about making sure that there is growth in the outer boroughs from tourism, and that tourists are spending their money in as diverse as possible a range of different attractions and venues, from large to very small, some businesses, but also in community organisations and not-for-profits like galleries or museums.
And are you able to track that? The diversity of where these visitors are spending their time and their money?
We are working on creating a new data set. So at the moment, the data to do that doesn't exist, but we're working with London First, MasterCard and Ernst & Young to be able to get better data on where tourists spend their money in London. What we do know is what general tourist behaviour is, and that the kinds of tourists who are more likely to spend money at a diverse range of places and to spend their money outside of Zone 1 is generally, from the evidence, it's people who travel long haul because they're in the city for longer. It's younger audiences, and it's particularly younger audiences who have what we would describe as sort of culturally curious mindset. So what they want from their holiday is to feel like they're living like a Londoner, discovering hidden gems, having an authentic experience. And because that's what they want, they're much more likely to travel to outer boroughs and to spend their money at a much, much wider range of different places. So different bars, nightclubs, diverse culture. And so our whole tourism marketing strategy for this year is focused on getting those kinds of tourists to come to London, because what we do know is that once they're here, they're much more likely to spend in a range of places that supports a broader London economy. So that's really the focus of our tourism work now.
Thank you. Now, just going back to the difficult context that we're working in at the moment, what are you, and also the sort of safeguarding of jobs, what are you doing about other countries trying to poach London companies that are based here in London?
So we believe that there are about 90 agencies from other countries, cities and regions from around the world who have people on the ground in London actively trying to move business out of London every day. London has fundamental strengths which make it a very attractive place to do business. However, we're not complacent about keeping business in London. And that's why we have this dedicated retention team that is set up to keep jobs in London. And what that retention team does is it proactively goes out and speaks to the foreign investors that we've brought into London over the past 8 years to see how they're doing, to see whether they have any concerns, to provide reassurance and to signpost them to services that would be able to help them. It also takes referrals from a wide network of partners if they have heard of any businesses who they're concerned might be at risk of leaving London or who they know are actively being courted by, whether it's Paris or Frankfurt or wherever. They can refer them to us and our team will then go and engage directly with those businesses.
And what kind of incentives do you kind of offer to them to get them to stay?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have any financial incentives that we are able to offer. But I think we find that reassurance and signposting does go some way. So in terms of reassurance, what we find often, particularly with international investors, is the fact that someone from the city has bothered to reach out to say, thank you for investing in London, thank you for creating jobs here, we really value your business, you're welcome here, we want you to stay, that has value. Mm-hmm. Secondly, we then listen to their concerns, and what we find is often it's about talent, and there we're able to help by signposting to sources of talent they may not be aware of. And that may be things like mayoral initiatives around digital skills, it may be to specialist recruitment agencies, it may be to business improvement districts or local council initiatives around employability. So that can help. And then the third area is if they have specific concerns related to policy or regulation, where they aren't sure what it will mean for them, what we can then do is we'll refer them to the relevant central government department or pass on their concerns to the relevant central government department, which means at least they feel that they've been heard and that their concerns are being taken into account.
Mm-hmm. And then just thinking about your international offices and the work that they're doing, what KPIs do you have for the international offices?
So the international offices have the same KPIs as the overall business, so it's gross value added to the economy. And then at a more internal level, they have lead generation targets. So they have targets in terms of going out and finding contestable inward investment leads. Okay, so and what these contestable inward investment leads or companies from other places, what sort of companies are you targeting? So we typically target scale-up businesses, and they tend to be technology-driven, whether they are in life sciences or the creative industries or financial services. Often they are technology-driven. So typically it's a business that has done very well and grown very fast in its home market. So let's say in North America, it's from Silicon Valley or it's from Toronto. It's done really well in its home market. Often they're very young companies, maybe 2-3 years old. And they're now ready for an international expansion. Typically, one of the points that we would engage with them is when they get the funding for an international expansion, which is often what is called a Series A by a venture capitalist, which is the first kind of significant investment of venture capital, which typically is given to a business to fund a big international investment. So it's at that point, or just before, when we know they're approaching that level of investment and that sort of size, that we'll go and have the conversation with them, because that's when they're planning for international expansion, but that it's actually serious and they can do something about it. Okay, thank you. And I've just got one more question, which is, what do you see as the failures that you've had, or have you had any failures in this last couple of years, and what lessons do you take from those experiences? So clearly last year we didn't meet our retained jobs target. The lessons we learned from that, I think, was that we had underestimated the importance of talent in the retention of jobs in London, and that's why we've put a real focus on talent and increased our efforts around talent this year. So I think for us that's something that we learnt from last year. One of the things we're really trying to address with our new strategy is focus. So in the past we worked with a very large number of international markets and a very wide range of sectors, and that was probably the right thing to do when we were in a very positive and favourable geopolitical and macroeconomic context. Now that the context has changed, I think we're really trying to use our limited resources as best we can to get the best possible value and return on investment for London from that. So our lesson is really trying to be more focused, to do fewer things but to do them better and to be able to invest more in them.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a list of colleagues that would like to ask questions. Jeanette first.
Chair, I've just got a couple of questions that follow on from that, and it's for me to just try once again to put the work that you're doing into context. And this is my first time. I think I've been scrutinising you now for over 10 years, if not longer. I wouldn't say I'm still in fog, but it just always seems to me that the amount of money that you have, it's a big amount, it's 40 million, but it always seems to be such a struggle for you to be getting an impact with that amount of money. So I was just wondering, how do you work with other organisations like London First and City of London? Because it just strikes me, if you're out there beavering away with your small pot, the City of London's pot is huge. London First has got 300 London-based businesses, so a bigger base than you. So you with your London mayoral remit, should we be satisfied that what you're doing is all you can do, or should you be looking to be working much more collaboratively?
So we are looking...
I'm happy to take from Andrew and give you a rest.
Go for it.
So we do work very closely with the City of London, particularly on financial services and fintech businesses. Catherine McGuinness sits on our board. They have offices overseas. Our teams in those markets work very closely with those City of London colleagues. Their offices overseas have a slightly different focus. They're looking mainly at companies coming to list in London, whereas we're looking at those companies to come and set up. But certainly City of London, City UK, we are working closely with. In terms of London First, the first inward investment agency that I originally worked with, London First Centre, spun out of London First, so there are close links there, and there continue to be close links. Laura mentioned a project we're currently working with on London First, which is to help support the tourism vision that we developed last year, looking at the value of tourism in outer London. So it's working with a number of their partners, who are also partners of ours as well, so MasterCard, Airbnb and EY, to look at the spend data from MasterCard and Airbnb in terms of where tourism is spending money across the city. EY are then manipulating that data, and by next February we will have a heat map to show what tourists are spending in each borough across London. And we think that will be very valuable in terms of then helping us to divert activities with that intelligence in terms of attracting more tourists into outer London.
So you recognise that you're working in a sort of collaborative framework, and then that begs the question, how do you decide what you can claim what the others can claim, and in the middle somewhere the double counting that may go on?
So yes, we absolutely recognise that we're working in a collaborative environment, and we have no desire to duplicate things that other organisations are doing or do things that others could do better. Just to give you an example, the week before last, Deputy Mayor Agrawal led a business delegation to Frankfurt of fast-growing London fintech businesses to expand into the German market. Because we had secured high-level meetings with some major German banks who are significant investors in the city, Catherine McGuinness, the Chair of Policy and Resources of the City of London Corporation, accompanied us on that trip to do those meetings jointly with the Deputy Mayor so that we had a clear, common, united voice of London, both for the overall city and for the square mile. And we're doing much more looking at our calendars, where are we going, making sure we're not duplicating if it doesn't make sense, but going in together where that's the most sensible thing to do.
Right. And you wouldn't have an answer to my other question, would be it would happen whether you were there or not. I suppose that's the question for one of your competitors, because you would say you're key to that bit of activity. Is that because you have a deputy mayor, you've got a mayoral remit? Is that what makes you key to that sort of development?
So when we're working with a company, we're very clear about who the lead agency is. So if one of our teams in market was to come across a business that was very much pure financial services and that the best agency to help land that in London might be the City UK, we would refer that business on and we then wouldn't claim it. Equally, when we work with the Department for International Trade, they often find businesses who want to invest in London that they then refer to us. We would then claim that, and it would then be reflected in their pipeline in their numbers in a specific way. So there are sort of established protocols, if you like, between these different agencies in terms of how we refer leads between us so that the right organisation is working on them.
Yeah, and lastly, because you brought in Deputy Mayor Agrawal, and I'm just taking you back to the recent delegation that was made to India. Was that before you opened the 2 offices at a cost of £500,000 or afterwards? And how would you account for the impact of such a delegation, which I suppose you organised and you were a part of?
So when that delegation went out, we already had the office in Mumbai, because we've had that for several years, but we hadn't yet opened the office in Bangalore. So we had 1, but not 2. In terms of how we look at the impact of a trade delegation, that's reflected in the gross value added of trade to the London economy. And that's where we look at the businesses that we work with on the Mayor's International Business Programme, which is the ERDF funded programme, and they declare to us how their participation in the programme has increased their revenue or helped them to secure additional investment.
Okay, thanks.
Andrew.
A few questions, if I may. Jeanette raised with you London First and saying there's about 300 participants in London First. You've got 300 participants. Are they the same people?
Some are the same, but
I suspect there's quite a lot of overlap.
But the majority are different. But we're doing different jobs, really. London First is a sort of lobbying organisation on behalf of those businesses, which is mainly focused around improving the London product, whereas we're promoting it.
And then on tourism, you said you're trying to promote outer London boroughs. What engagement have you had with those boroughs' administrations?
So we have regular engagement with boroughs. We have point people within our team who are responsible for a number of boroughs. So we split up into north, south, east, west, and they are liaison with those
so if I take
boroughs.
my outer London borough of Barnet, what engagement have you had with them?
I can't tell you specifically what engagement we've had with them, but we do organise workshops.
Or the Chair's Borough of Harrow.
We run workshops which all boroughs are invited to talk about both our tourism and FDI activity.
Perhaps you could let me have a note with a bit of detail about what engagement you actually have had with Barnet. I don't know if you want one for Harrow as well.
Hillingdon, because I was told that you hadn't had any after our meeting a year ago. Havering. Anyway, a list.
Yeah,
another list, that would be great.
You're quite right to say there are lots of things to see in outer London, but I am concerned at the extent to which we are actually getting tourists diverted to.
Okay, thank you, Sean.
I haven't finished yet.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Right. Job safeguarding, you didn't make your target, which you've indicated, and you're now saying you're focusing on talent. Isn't that sort of cherry picking? I mean, presumably we've lost lots of other jobs which you haven't safeguarded in other spheres of activity.
So there's the jobs that we are trying to directly safeguard through our intervention one-to-one with the businesses, where we have this target of 1,000. But clearly, all the work that we're doing around having a credible and confident and optimistic narrative for London's future should safeguard jobs in London much more broadly. And that's why we think it's so important that we do this work on London's global reputation as a fantastic world-leading city to do business, so that the impact of that is felt more widely. Because yes, of course there are more than 1,000 jobs in London.
Yeah, well, of course there are more than 1,000 jobs in London. I'm more concerned about where they're going. I mean, we've seen this real drain on retail, for example, and we've also seen problems in hospitality from recruitment. So you're not following those up?
So with the limited resources that we have to be really focused on where we can make a difference, and that's in those priority sectors that we've identified, where London has a global competitive advantage and which bring good growth to the economy. So we're really focused on attracting jobs into those sectors, so the life sciences, creative industries.
This is safeguarding jobs that are already here, not bringing in new jobs.
So we're still focused on those priority sectors because that's where we feel we can make the biggest difference. There are a whole range of policy and other issues that would play into why jobs are or aren't staying or leaving in London, ranging from kind of macroeconomic context, fiscal policy and so on, over which we don't have any impact. So we're focused on working with the businesses where we think we can make a difference, because they are international investors of the scale where we can have an impact, and they are businesses that where we know their sector and their ecosystem very well, so we can provide good quality guidance.
Okay. Going again, look at your targets. You've got pieces of coverage in international press. Is that presumably worldwide rather than your target countries? Yes?
Yes.
And are those pieces of coverage generated by you or what?
Those were pieces of coverage generated by us.
Okay. And then you go on to say that your target of positive media coverage is 30%. It seems to be remarkably low, and then you've achieved 30.5%, which presumably means 70% is either neutral or hostile.
Most of it would have been neutral. Going forward, we're not using pieces of articles of coverage as a KPI, because we feel that with our new method around looking at engagement across all of our channels, we're able to have a much more robust and comprehensive measure of our marketing activity.
So where did this 30% target come from then?
I believe that was based on the historic baseline data, but I can get back to you with more detail on that.
I mean, it's obviously subjective to decide what's positive, what's neutral and what's hostile, but it does seem to be a rather peculiar target, and particularly one set so low. So you've abandoned that?
We've got a more comprehensive measure.
Okay. And have you abandoned the coverage in the international press more generally, or is that still in the mix?
We're using it, but it's not the only thing we're looking at to look at the impact of our marketing. So we're looking at international media coverage, but also, importantly, engagement on social media channels, which, given that we target particularly younger audiences, is very relevant.
Okay, and just finishing on younger audiences, though, I don't think necessarily just younger audiences. We've got the nighttime economy issues. Are you particularly raising that?
So I'm a member of the Mayor's Nighttime Commission, so we've been very actively feeding into that, and I know it's going to report its conclusions, I believe, in the next couple of months.
Okay, well, don't get started on the Commission, because there's all sorts of questions that arise out of that, I'm afraid. And I don't particularly want to go down that route, because we'll be here all afternoon. But anyway.
Separately to that, we've had a focus on promoting London's nighttime offer through our own channels, so our social media channels and our website, as well as promoting grassroots music as well through our own channels.
Okay, Sean.
Just a few things. Firstly, you gave an example earlier on about companies who had just reached that point where they've had their first piece of major investment and looking to go international. How do you find those companies?
So we find those companies by mostly by working with the kinds of organisations that would know about them, which is usually venture capitalists. So we have a big network of venture capitalists around the world, and one of the reasons it's really important to have people on the ground is so that they can maintain those relationships, so that when the venture capitalist has a business in their portfolio that they've invested in that they think is coming up to expansion, they immediately give us a call and say, oh, we've got this business, they're thinking about London. The other important source is incubators, so the organisations that host startups when they're quite small and help them to really grow. They would typically have large networks of businesses and be aware of when a business might be approaching that scale. Professional advisors, so particularly lawyers and accountants, when businesses are approaching raising money, so getting that important Series A round, they would always have bankers, lawyers, accountants who'd be working with them to prepare their business cases and their pitch decks. So those organisations know of these businesses, so maintaining really strong networks of those so that they refer them to us is really important. And through other public sector organisations, so Department for International Trade, a lot of our leads come from them, but also city-to-city partnerships. So for example, last week I was in Toronto where we saw the Toronto Board of Trade. They're the organisation that's responsible for supporting Toronto businesses to grow internationally. So they will be a fantastic source of leads from us from the Toronto region, because they are working with large numbers of Toronto businesses trying to help them to become exporters. And when they become exporters and grow internationally, they become potential inward investors for us. So they are our partner agency and would be referring to us. So to summarise all of that, a wide network of different kinds of partners who are on the ground teams maintain relationships with.
And earlier on, my colleague Andrew spoke to you about the industries that you're identifying, that you're focusing on, and you have a plan around that. But I just like to make a plea, because those industries, retail, hotel, they might not be big and flashy, but of course they employ the largest amount of Londoners, in comparison to maybe financial services. So why do they not factor in the same way, in that they give volume employment, which is obviously important?
So tourism is a priority sector for us, and we address that on the demand side by keeping a good flow of international tourists into the economy through our tourism promotion work. But more broadly, the sectors that we're focused on are those that were identified in the Mayor's Economic Development Strategy, and the subsectors are those which were identified in the strategy and which the Economic Development team at the GLA with us have agreed should be our priorities, because they generate good growth for London.
Okay, I think we need to have a look at what you advise of volume employment as well. And just no, Chair, that's enough for me. Okay.
All right. If I can also ask, you were talking about advertising, etc., and PR. We know that you've hired Freud's and Cavalier Communications over the last few years. Can you tell me how much you've actually spent on these PR agencies?
I don't have that information to hand.
Ballpark
Come back to you
figure.
on it. I'm sorry, I need to come back to you.
Was it a lot, or not a lot, or?
I think it was for some specific campaign, so it's under the threshold of the contracts that we've
Everything
published.
seems to be. Okay, so can you release that information to us then, please?
Yes.
Definitely. Okay, I'm surprised that we don't know that at all. Okay, right, let's go on to Brexit then. That's yours, Fiona.
Thank you. I've got a number of sort of areas of questioning, but I just want to ask something about the tourism in the sort of context of Brexit first. Have you done any research on what the potential impact might be if people from other EU countries need to get visas going forward? What kind of impact that might be?
We haven't done our own primary research on that, but we look very carefully at research that's published by a whole range of organisations, from government departments, arm's length bodies, professional consultancies. So we're constantly looking at all the evidence as it's being produced on Brexit.
Okay. And how is LNP preparing for Brexit more generally? I know it's come up in other sort of areas of questioning, but what specific preparations are you making?
So our response to Brexit is in these 4 main areas, and I'm happy to discuss any of them that you'd like in more detail. The first is around working harder and doing more and investing more in finding businesses who are thinking about international expansion and convincing them to come to London, and that activity happens largely overseas in market because it happens early when they're still just thinking about it. The second area is talent and making sure that we have up-to-date, credible, authoritative information about access to talent in London so that we can address some of the misperceptions that we know are out there and that are problematic. The third area is around retaining business in London, and as we discussed, that's about having proactive conversations with companies that are invested here to provide reassurance, to signpost them to other services and to pass on any concerns that they have to central government. And the final area is about having this really credible, confident future narrative for London about why London will continue to be a fantastic and exciting place to do business. And that's where we are currently working to bring together a whole network of people who are influential about London internationally so that we can all speak with one voice and share the same positive story about the future of London. I should add that we're working very closely with both London First and the City of London on that, and we would love to work with any of you who would like to get involved in using your influence to promote this positive story about London's future.
Thank you. And you mentioned earlier, or it's mentioned earlier, that there's 90 organisations in London trying to court companies to other parts of the world. What were the numbers of people who were doing that before? Did you track that before, or is that just something that you've tracked since the vote to leave the EU?
We haven't, and it's anecdotal. But it's anecdotal because there's no way of knowing this for sure, as this isn't public information. But our anecdotal sense is that the number of people has significantly increased, and we're seeing much more aggressive tactics from our competitor agencies, and much more significant investment from our competitor agencies in promotion into London.
Okay, thank you. And which sectors do you see facing the greatest risk from a no-deal Brexit?
I think that's probably more of a question for a think tank or for a policymaker, but I can give you an anecdotal sense, though this isn't an area of expertise for us, as we're not a policy-making organisation. But my sense would be that it will be the most highly regulated industries, such as financial services, those that are importing and exporting goods if there's a customs issue, and if there were to be a restriction on talent, then those that are highly dependent on foreign talent.
Yeah. And when you're trying to attract businesses to London at the moment, are people citing the uncertainty over what kind of Brexit will be as a reason not to invest at the moment, or are you not hearing that?
Some are, and some aren't. So I was in Germany the week before last, where, just to give you an example, I met a number of fast-growing financial technology businesses who are of the right scale that they would be thinking about international expansion. Two of them said to me that they had been thinking about London. One actually said they'd been thinking about moving their entire HQ and just relocating to London, but that they won't do it until they know what the outcome is, because they're particularly concerned about passporting, so the ability to provide financial services cross-border in the Union. Neither of them said that they would never invest in London, but they felt that because of the current uncertainty, they wanted to wait until things were clearer. But then last week I was in Toronto and New York, met a large number of potential companies to convince them to invest in London. Some of them raised Brexit and some of them raised it as an issue, but equally a large number, it didn't even come up in the conversation. And that's quite typical of what we see, which is that the European markets are very strongly affected. So it would be rare that we'd have a conversation with a European investor where Brexit didn't come up and didn't come up as a negative. Yeah. But that further away, so in the US and China and India, it comes up less often.
And will you be going back to people who've raised concerns now and haven't invested once it's clear what type of Brexit we'll be having?
Oh, absolutely. So all the businesses we talk to, we log very carefully, and our in-market teams will be maintaining relationships with them, following up very actively. And as soon as we know what the deal is, I'm sure we'll go back immediately to those businesses and make the case for London again. Okay. Yeah, definitely.
And do you think there's more that the Mayor could do to support businesses prepare?
It's probably not my role to comment on the Mayor's policies more broadly.
Okay, and are you contributing in any ways to the Brexit Business Resource Hub? It was launched quite recently.
Yeah, so we're aware of the Brexit Business Resource Hub, and once our talent resources launch, the two will link to each other. So, yeah.
Right. And what work is the Retention and Growth Task Force doing?
So that's the team that I mentioned previously,
Yeah.
that's having those conversations with businesses to do signposting, reassurance and referrals.
Okay, great. And to get some balance in the discussion, does Brexit present any opportunities?
So we do hear from some audiences, particularly students in some markets like India and China, who feel that it might be beneficial for them because they might have easier access to immigration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my colleagues expressed some surprise, so I think I'd probably be interested in that surprise. Okay. And is there anything else you'd like to add on the context of Brexit?
I think that the main thing for us for Brexit is that this is a really critical moment for the promotion of London, and what we do to respond to Brexit in the next 6 to 12 months will really define London's position on the global stage for many years to come. So now is the time for us to act, to respond, to be really targeted and smart and ambitious and bold in what we do, and to join forces with the organisations and the individuals who we should be working with very collaboratively to promote London around the world.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just to go on from that, I mean, all through this morning, you're quite rightfully saying that we must talk up London and all the wonderful things that there are here. Brexit is going to happen, we all accept that. So surely you should be looking at the opportunities that you can be selling out there. This section has been, it seems to me this section, you've just been repeating bits and pieces from before. It hasn't been any different. And Brexit will make a difference. I mean, some of us think it will make a good difference, some of us don't, which is fair enough. But given what you do, surely you should have identified lots and lots of opportunities so you could go out there to different markets saying, these are your opportunities.
That's absolutely what we are doing.
What are those opportunities?
So that's absolutely what we are doing, and that's why we're focused on these particular sectors where London's really strong and there are great opportunities for international businesses. And within the broader sort of subsectors, some particular areas where London is world leading and we're selling very hard are fintech, the application of artificial intelligence to life sciences, video gaming, urban technology. These are all areas where London is genuinely leading the world. There are really exciting developments happening in businesses here, in London's universities. We are out. What our teams are doing day in, day out is meeting businesses and sharing that story about what's really exciting, why London is the best place in the world to grow your fintech business, your green tech businesses, your digital tech business, or whatever it is. So that's absolutely what we're doing, and having this really positive but credible story about London's future is a key part of our response to Brexit.
Okay, fine. Just one side comment. Do you, in your experience, is the increase in crime in London having any effect on business?
To the best of my knowledge, we're not able to see whether it is. So I couldn't give you a response, but I'm happy to have a conversation with the Insights team and see whether we're able to share any evidence on that.
Okay, because the way it's going up, it obviously is an area that we should be concerned about. Any colleagues want to say anything else, or ask anything else? No? Well, that brings us to the end. So can I thank our guests for their contributions today? Can we note the discussion, and can we also delegate authority to me as chairman to agree an appropriate output from this meeting? I would be grateful if you could stay seated until the end of the meeting, as the next item of business that I will consider also relates to London and Partners. Forgive me for this lengthy piece that I'm going to have to read out, because I've got to make sure I get it correct. Officers are now circulating a supplementary agenda which sets out an item of additional business. I have agreed to take this item as urgent business in accordance with the relevant provisions 100B brackets 4 of the LGA Act 1972. This allows the committee to consider at the earliest opportunity whether to summons information from London and Partners. The committee has been looking closely at the transparency and openness of London and Partners. As a committee, we wrote to the Chief Officer of the GLA, Mary Hartley, asking for her assistance in obtaining a range of information in relation to London and Partners' spend, impact and other work that would assist us in our scrutiny. We felt that the response received did not provide all the information the committee has requested. Following on from that request, can I ask the committee to agree the recommendations before them, which is, and I'll read it, that the committee, under the provisions of section 61 1 and B and 61 4 and B of the Greater London Authority Act 1999, as amended, requires the Chief Executive of London and Partners, Laura Citron, to provide the documents listed below, for which notice will be given in accordance with section 62 of the Greater London Authority Act 1999, as amended, in due course, and with the documents to be provided no later than 2 weeks from the date of the notice requiring these documents. And they are any documents setting out how the claims set out in London and Partners Annual Review 2016-17 have added £340 million to London's economy and supported or created 10,112 jobs in the 2016-17 year, were arrived at, and all data and information used, including documents setting out which companies, organisations London and Partners have assisted, how they have assisted them, the evidence for that assistance, and what those companies have then done to add GVA or create support jobs. And also documents setting out details of London and Partners' staffing structure, including the pay bands for staff, details of job titles, and where posts sit within each directorate, division or group, and the agendas, papers and minutes of London and Partners board meetings held in the last 5 years. These documents and files are to be provided no later than 2 weeks from the date of notice requiring these documents, and that the committee notes the discussion on how to ensure transparency of London and Partners operations and calls for London and Partners formally to commit from the financial year of 2019-20 to publishing all spend above £250 on a quarterly basis. Okay? Right. Can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you. Can we note the work programme and priorities for 2018-19 as set out in the report, and agree the proposals for the committee's November 2018 meeting slot to look at the impact of universal credit on self-employed Londoners?
Agreed.
The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for Tuesday the 20th November 2018 at 10 a.m. in the chamber. Yeah, is that all right with you?
GLA Chamber Sound. GLA Chamber Sound. GLA Chamber Sound. GLA Chamber Sound. GLA Chamber